about 2 minutes before 11. What I would suggest you guys do is maybe grab some pen and paper. I'm going to give you some rules for OOP that you could follow. So if you guys can maybe, if you want to write down some notes, just in terms of OOP, it's actually an easy question if you know how to interpret the questions, because the wording all just means something, so therefore it's important. So if you're joining for the first time, we are looking at the final of 2019, question 3.1. We started with it yesterday, so don't try and copy down the answers because it will be posted on YouTube. I see yesterday's, we have a great host this week that is giving us the YouTube's daily. So yesterday and the day before's YouTubes are online. If you look under the playlist on grade 12 IT, the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, we're now in the 4th week. All the videos are loaded up there. Please also tell your friends that we've moved over to Teams. They don't need a login for Teams. They just need to have Teams downloaded as an app, as it doesn't work. These lessons don't work through the browser. So if you guys can please tell them, download the app and then click on the link. And then when it opens in your browser, then you pick the option, as you guys probably did, to open in the Teams app. Some people are struggling with these new links, and the links change daily. So to get the new links, you need to go to, just Google Africa Team Gigs, and on their website, on their homepage, right at the top, there's a link that you can click to receive the links via email. I see last night's links went out about midnight. So you will find it there. And if you can share it with your friends as well. Some people are really struggling with a new platform. So I think it's ready for us to go. Welcome to STEM Lockdown Digital School. This is grade 12 IT. And my name is Lalani Lagransi and I am your presenter today. So yesterday, we started with the final of 2019, question 3.1. And if you just joined, I want you to go and grab some pen and paper. I'm going to give you some rules that you can write down. I'll tell you when to write down. You don't need to write down the code. These videos are on the website, but there are a few rules on YouTube. But there are a few rules that is important for you guys to follow, and I'm going to try as we go along just help you with those rules, because this question is really only about reading and not so much about interpretation. So let me go to where we were yesterday. Remember, these here, these 3 values were given. They are called the fields or the attributes, and we have to take note of their data type. We created the constructor. And remember, the word receive said we're receiving the name and the weight. We don't do more than that. And then just to show you the constructor quickly, for some reason we're not jumping today. There we go. There's my constructor create. And remember, fields F for first, they go on the left and your parameters on the right. And then we had to set the score to 0. So that was what we did yesterday in question 3.1. It's important for you guys to make the constructor work. Without the constructor, you have this question will probably count 40 marks. and you will get no output. So you're going to have to continue to code with no output, and that's really difficult. So make sure you know how to do your constructor properly. Now, just before we continue, when you open your program, this here is where you place your name right at the top. Not your name, sorry. You're not allowed to put your name or your school name. You will have some long number there that you have to type in. And make sure that you do this for both your class as well as your main form. In this program, question 3, that would be in 2 places that you have to type your exam number in. And then in the other questions, just once in each unit. So make sure that you do that. Okay, so let's go to our second question here. 3.1.2 is asking us to write an accessor method. So an accessor method, this is what you can write down. If the question says accessor, that means number 1, it is a function. Number 2, it is public, and it will always just return a field. That's what it will say. It will say a method called getScore. So write an accessor method, and basically what it's doing is it's returning one of your attributes, and the data type of this function will be the same as the value that it's returning. So fscore was an integer, so therefore getScore is an integer. And if they didn't give you the name getScore, so they just said write an accessor method, you need to start it with a get. That's the naming convention, and they could allocate marks for using the correct naming convention. So that's for accessor methods, they should always be functions, public, and start with a get. And match the names given in an exam paper with your code, because this here, they could maybe in the main form have a call statement for this function with this name as part of the given code. So make sure you match the names the same as is given in the exam. Now, when we're doing these questions, I said to you guys yesterday, we want to do them one at a time from top to bottom. You want to make sure I only do the constructor, I make sure it's working. I only do now the accessor and make sure it's working. Mostly, while each number here in 3.1 will be only one method, but there is an exception when it comes to an accessor method. In previous past papers, they have asked you to write accessor methods for more than one field. So there is an instance where you have one number, well, 3.1 whatever, but you're writing more than one accessor method. So take note of that. It doesn't mean it's one accessor, so one function returning more than one value, because that's not possible. One function can only return one result. So if the question tells you it could, for accessor methods, it's the only place that I found it in past papers where one question asked us to write more than one function or method. The others will typically ask you just for one. So an accessor method, very simple. I'm going to go back to the code here. It's the function getScore, there it is. The data type is an integer because it's returning fscore, and fscore is an integer. So then you push Control-Shift-C and you get the skeleton code, and all an accessor method is your result. Remember, every function needs a result, is assigned to that attribute that it should be returning. Okay, so very, very, very easy marks to score, but you would have to know, because now yesterday I said, no, I haven't said that yet, but if a question says return, it means it's a function, but also this one doesn't say return. It says an accessor method, and then you must also know it is a function. So that is question 3.1.2. The next one here, 3.1.3, says write a method called update score. Remember yesterday I said a highlighter is recommended when the word receive is there. We don't want to add receive, that you can write down as well. This is throughout. This is not specifically for functions or procedures or constructors. This is overall in your paper. The word receive means there's a parameter. and you do not want to create more or less than what the question is asking. So in this instance, they're saying that it's receiving an integer as a parameter, and then we want to add that value to our score. So we are changing our score to take the existing score and adding on to it according to the parameter. Now, nowhere does this question tell me it's returning a value or that this method has a result. Therefore, if the word return or result is not in there, we know it is a procedure. Well, I should say if the word return result or accessor isn't in the question, then we know it's a procedure. So let's quickly have a look at my procedure here. I have procedure update score, and it's receiving an integer parameter. Even if they didn't tell me it's an integer, I would know it's an integer because I'm adding it onto F-score. So I can't add a real value onto F-score. So I can only add an integer, so therefore this parameter would be an integer, even if the question didn't help me with that part. And remember, a procedure does not have a data type here at the end. So it just ends with my bracket there for my parameter declaration, and then a semicolon. And this semicolon is important to add in there for Control-Shift-C to work. Remember, when you do your one heading, you can use Control-Shift-C, but if you have any errors above this line, Control-Shift-C is not going to work. So make sure that all functions have data types and that every line here will end with a semicolon. So if I go to my update score, P score is added to the existing score. It's not replacing the score. So sometimes this question, typically called also a mutator method, which is a method, a procedure that makes changes to an existing field in our class or an attribute to our class. This is asked in two ways. One is take that parameter and add it onto the existing value. And secondly, it could also say change this value, in which case you won't have this part here. You'll just say P score is F score. So what we're doing here is if the score, remember our constructor gave F score a value of 0. So the first time update score is called by my main program. Let's say this was a value of 5. This here will now say 0 plus 5. Because my score was 0, I'm adding 5 to it. And then 5 is stored over F score. If I run that program again, it will now be 5 plus my parameter, let's say it was 10, and now 15 is stored in F score. So very easy, but it's important to read the question. There are marks allocated for having a procedure. I can't remember exactly the mark allocation for last year, but from previous past papers, we often give marks for you selecting that it's a procedure and also for having your parameter. So your signature here and the parameter being integer could also be a mark. So make sure you read and apply exactly what the question is asking you to do. Okay, so that is our update score procedure. Remember, there's a Q&A that you can open up to post questions. I can't see it, but our host will read them to me. So please feel free to post a question there if you have anything as we go along. He'll just interrupt me and read me the question. So question 3.1.4, still in our class. Remember yesterday I said none of these will score marks in the main form. We only mark what is in your class. So here it says write a method called calculate BMI. Again, the word receive is there. There's a parameter or more. We're going to have to read further. So it's receiving the height of the player. Now, the height, we are going to have to look at the input from the user in our program where it's called, because we actually don't know if it's an integer or a real value. Now, height most probably would be real, because I'm not going to say I'm either 1 meter or 2 meters. So I think we can take the possibility that it is a real value, but you can also scroll down, or well, you guys page on to where the height is entered, and you'll see here the height. This is in question 3.2, where the height of 1.8 meters are entered. So you know that's going to be your argument here. So therefore, if I scroll back now and I get back here, I know that height would be real. And then the next part is really important. You're going to calculate the BMI and return. So the word return indicates that it's a function. Remember, every function has a result, and the result is the player's BMI as per the question. And here you have the formula of the player, of the BMI. And now you have, yes.
The question is, can we also use the name of the function instead of the word result?
Yes, you can use the name of the function instead of result. That would be correct. So there's actually many solutions often, but while I'm teaching, I'm showing you guys just one way. You can either use the name of the function or you can use result. Both will do the same thing. I just often find that result is quicker to type because the names of these functions are often quite long. So the BMI is the result of this function. So remember, every function needs a return data type. And just by looking at this here, the moment that I see a divide, I don't even have to look further or think further. The moment I see a divide, I know that the result here is going to be real. Whenever we divide, our result is always real. Unless, of course, if we have a round or a seal or a floor here. But this result here will be a real answer because of the divide. Now, another thing is this, you are going to assume your functions or all your methods are going to be public unless the question tells you otherwise. So none of these questions, actually all these functions and procedures and the constructor were all public, and we'll only do a method as private if our wording in our paper indicates that. Okay, so let's quickly have a look at my signature there of my BMI. And by the way, we do mark the top part here of your signatures. We don't mark them down here. If you've made a mistake with one of your functions or procedures, go and make sure that you change it up here as well. Don't just change it at the bottom. So the function here receives the weight that I said was real, and it's returning a real result. Then you're going to push Control-Shift-C. Now, please don't add extra parameters. Some learners got confused because it asked us to use the weight of the player. So they decided, oh, I need the weight of the player as well as a parameter. Remember, your constructor runs first. So we can't call any of our other methods in our main form unless our constructor ran. That's called instantiating the object. So our constructor here will run first, and in our constructor we gave if weight of player a value. So now in all of your other methods you can assume that if weight of player has a value, as I did here, it does not need to receive a value again. And the result here is real. Well, my result of my function needs a result, that's important. There are also marks often for a function for the result getting any value, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, just getting a value. So there is the weight of the player and then the square of my parameter divided by the square of my parameter. And that was your calculate BMI method. Okay, so this one here says write code for the method eligible for selection, and we have to determine using F-score in which category this player falls into. So we have the low, medium, and high possibility. Important here is this little line at the bottom. The method must return. Okay, so we know it's a function. Now, what is it returning? It's returning a relevant message. These are the messages. So now we know our function has a string data type. If you have a look at the wording here at the top, you are not going to see the word receive here. Therefore, it is not receiving a value. It's going to use F-score. And since there's no receive, there's no parameters. Since there's result, it's a function, and data type is going to be a string. So what we're doing here what I wanted to tell you, not just for this question, but all over your paper, if you see a table like this, this is a clue to either use a case statement, which we can do in this instance because F-score is an integer, and remember case statements can only use chars and integers. That's also why it's important to use the correct data types. Or it could indicate for us to use a nested if statement because it's either this or that or that. So these tables, if you see them, just think about it carefully. If it's a real or string value, definitely a nested if statement. If it's an integer or a char, you do have the option to either use the case or the nested if. Both will be correct. So let's quickly have a look at my solution here for eligible for selection. The function there, the name, no parameters, and a string data type. And I've given you guys just a different way of solving this problem. There's many ways of getting the correct output. The result here, I've initialized to the low possibility. Now, why I did this is just to show you that you actually can use result as a variable, as you would have used any other variable. So what I'm doing is I'm saying the possibility is low. If the score is more than 14, it's high. Else, if the score is 8 or more, it's medium. And very important to go and read your question properly to see is 14 included or not. It's always very sad if someone did this and added the equals instead of just saying greater than 14. So you will lose the mark for that, even though you might just get the right output for the set of data that they gave you for input and output. So whenever you're going to use a case or an if statement, make sure you read properly to see, for example, the score of 8 here was supposed to be included for medium. So this was my solution here for eligible for selection. Okay. So typically our last question is our toString. And our toString is always public. You can write this down. So toString is always public. It's always a function. It doesn't have parameters. So just put cross and no parameters. And the return data type is always a string.
Apologies.
So public, yes.
The question is, can I ask you private methods?
Yes, they can ask you to create a private method, and they have done so before in previous papers. I just can't remember exactly where they are. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search through my past papers today, and I'll give you an example tomorrow. I'm just writing this down as well, of where we had to create a private method in one of our previous past papers. But the toString will never be. So a couple of them won't be private ever. The one is a constructor. So the following, if you want to write down what is definitely public, is your constructor, your accessor methods, which is your functions, your mutator methods, which is those set procedures. One of the other papers will refer to mutators, so I'd like us to do another past paper together. But mutator methods and then toStrings. Those four are always public. And the rest you assume the methods are public unless it states it in the question states otherwise. And I'll just have to go and find that wording again. So, okay, so here we go with the toString. In our toString question, they're going to give you the format like this. Now, this means this is the label. Please remember to add your labels. There are marks for the labels. Even if your class isn't working, add the labels for your toString so at least you can get those marks. Then some learners are adding in their answers these brackets, the greater than and less than symbols. You don't have to add them. What they mean is that you're not displaying the actual words F player name, you are displaying the value that is stored in the attribute F player name. So these indicate fields for you, also sometimes in your text files and arrays. So these brackets don't mean you have to include the brackets. Now you must remember your toString can only return one string at a time. So therefore you have to put all of this in one string and make sure that you have the enters. So we will code this and then put a #9 after the player name, then the label of the weight, and then the field F weight of player, and then a #10 again. Sorry, did I say a #10 or a #9? This means #10 or 13. #13 both creates an enter. We'll have two #10s in this toString to make those enters. And then we have the label current score and then our integer F score. Now in this paper, they gave you an example of what this toString look like, but this is not always given. So this, we need to look at this example and see, okay, name, and that's the name. Very important is that you look at the screenshot and see, oh, okay, they're only displaying 1 decimal point. There'll be a mark allocated for showing only the 1 decimal point, and then your current score just as the number. However, if this is not given, you need to page to where the toString is called. And in this case, it's 3.2.2. You can see here, the top part here is my toString. Now, some of the learners, when they did the toString, then when they got to this question, they thought that the BMI was supposed to be added to your toString. Don't go and add things that is not asked for your toString. This was supposed to be in this be done in this button here. So I'm going to go back to my toString. So that's how you want to make sure that you have the right format. Sometimes they also have a little heading and an open line, and you have to match that format. So let's go to my toString. And there is my toString, public, a function, and a string data type. So this is how I complete my toString, is I make use of a result and I build a string. You can put it all in one long line, but it's easier for you to read your output to see all is fine, instead of having to scroll all the way up and down to go and find what you've done. And also it's easier for the marker to allocate your marks. So I really suggest you using this method. We start with the first line, so that's the label name and our field name for the player, plus a #10 to create that enter. What I'm doing here now is I'm building onto that string, like we do in string handling. So I'm taking what was in the result, and in this, if this line here runs, in this result is this at the moment. So I'm basically taking what I'm highlighting now and adding to that the weight, and then float to string the field name of the weight. And very important, check if you have done this program, check that you have (1) there. We're only displaying 1 decimal point. Then my #10, and I'm building onto my result again, my current score with the F score using into string. Now you're done with question 3.1, and this is a very good time to save and then run your program. Hopefully you have saved before. You guys know that last year we had some trouble with load shedding during the exams. So you want to make sure that you push Control-Shift-S all the time and don't wait until you're quite far into a question. So save your program often, but once you are done with your class, this is now the time that you save and run it. You won't see any output, but at least you can sort out any syntax errors that you have. Now, we're going to move on to the main form. I am going to show you the steps of how you would have to add all the code to link your class to your main form yourself, just in case you are asked to do that. In this question paper and in the recent past question papers, it was not required for you to do it, but I do think that it's good for you to know how to do it in case they do ask that. So at the top there, the name of the unit that you're going to copy out, and I'm going to show you that just now. I'm just going to make you aware of everything that you need to know of in your class. You're going to copy that out and you're going to paste it in the uses of your main form. Then you also need to take note here of the type, your class type. In this case, it's tPlayer, and the declaration of our object was also done, but this is what we're going to use as our data type of our object that we're going to declare. So if I go here to question 3, the main form, you will see this has been done for you, but this is where we would paste that name of the unit. And then the next bit that you have to do is declare, this has also been done for you. So you declare your object, and that is tPlayer, which is my type of my class from player_u. But this was provided for you, and it's important to take note of that when you start this exam. So I'm just going to, before I show you some answers there, you'll see that it says there's a global variable, object player, and then question 3.2.1. There it says that we have to write code for the name, use the name and weight of the player from the edit boxes. I would suggest that you guys first declare variables and store them from the edit boxes. It makes your calling or the instantiation of your object, so in other words, calling your constructor create, it makes it just so much simpler when you first store variables as the right data types. And also in previous years, there were marks allocated for the actual declaring of the variables and storing of the values into variables first. So make sure that you do that. Okay, then it says instantiate the object. Now, we often find that, you know, that IT practical, it's very possible to get full marks for. We do get quite a few learners every year that get full marks for the practical. And it's very sad if they get 149 out of 150 because they didn't display this message. So often this is a mark that you guys lose because you didn't read. So it says display a message using a dialog box. All you have to do is a show message. So you can see the word dialog box here, and then some learners tried the code dialog box, which doesn't exist. So it's important for you to have used the show message or message DLG, whatever you prefer, but show message is easier.
A question here. Could we not do it using the user unit and declare, I think is the word, the tPlayer under public? I'm not sure. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. You can. So what you are asking, I'm going to go back to my Delphi. You could place this. This was done for you, and this is what you'll use in this paper, but you can also do it there. Okay, so I'm sure that's what you were asking. You can put the declaration under private as well. So just see first, where did the examiners put this code? It could be under the declaration of your form, or it could be under private, but both will work. Okay, so as I was saying, read carefully that you have completed the whole paper and that you display every message that is asked. These are our easy marks. Remember, every paper has to have easy marks allocated to it. and this is an easy mark. So make sure that you read properly. Can you see that this just instantiating in this message is worth 5 marks? And it's not only important because it's 5 marks, it's also important that if you get this code wrong, you are going to code blindly and you are not going to be able to get any output. Sometimes your program, if you call your constructor incorrectly, your program will even run and won't crash, but you won't get any output. So it is very important. I'm going to show you the steps to help you remember how to do this. So let's go back into Delphi. The first part here is just the input from the user that I've stored. Remember, we're going to send our constructor create had 2 parameters. So here we need 2 arguments, and I'm going to talk more about them just now. But this is the line of code that is worth quite a few marks. Often it's marked for, it will be 1, 2, and then 3 marks here that I'll explain now. One for each NOD. Okay, but to remember how to do this and get it right, I want you to do the following. You copy out your declaration there from wherever it's declared, whether it's under private or there under the form declaration, and you paste it here and you change that to an assignment statement. So it used to be colon, now I have an assignment statement. Then you add dot create. And now it's giving you the hints of what you need to add. So copy the declaration. I'm going to undo so you guys can see it again. Okay, copy and paste the declaration. Change it to an equal sign. After the type, add dot create. And there I have my brackets and my hints. Okay, so that's a little tip. I have completed mine here for you. So then you will add your arguments. Remember, where we call methods, the values we're sending them are called arguments, and where we declare them in our class or any other place when we're doing just normal functions and procedures, they are called parameters. And what is very important is that your arguments and your parameters match in what I call NOD. And NOD stands for number. In other words, how many parameters were there? I need to have the same number of arguments. So I had 2 parameters, so therefore I need 2 arguments here, 1, 2. No more, no less. Then order. Then I have order, and that means the name is first and the weight is second. So if I go to my constructor create, you will see the name parameter was first, the weight parameter was second. When you're sending the arguments, you must send it in that same order. Name first, weight second. And then the last one here is data type. So if name is string as a parameter in my class, I need to send it a string here. If weight was real, I need to send it a real argument here. So this is what makes up those 5 marks, because the NOD, remember I said to you guys, remember it because we have NOD will count for 3 marks. So it's extremely important for you guys to get it right. For the marks as well as not getting it right is going to cause you lots of errors and no output. So important also is that your constructor always needs to run before any other program or any other method is called. So you will continuously have to click on question 3.2.1 before clicking on the other buttons, else those buttons will crash. So you have to make sure your constructor create runs first, and don't forget your little show message here for that easy mark allocated there. Okay, then we were asked for the BMI button. We get input, use an input dialog box. An input dialog box means it's an input box. Call the relevant methods for the height to calculate the BMI. Call your toString, display the BMI. Round it off to 1 decimal place. If they didn't say that, I would know to do that, because there I can see in the output there's just one decimal place. Now, as a suggestion, when you're writing an input box, I would suggest that you put the default values of the first example of input into your input box. I'll show you just now what I've done. So the height of the player, I'm going to make 1.8. And we have the weight of the player 70.3, and that you can put on your form. You can also put Olaf there on your edit boxes, but I have a feeling that for this paper it was given. But if it's not given, you can put the default values. So for your text properties of your edit boxes, you can just add it in once because you're going to type it in multiple times. So just type it in your object inspector and it speeds up the processing or the testing of your program in an exam. You just score some time to have more time for question 4. So I'm going to go to this button and we have the input there for the height. This is what I was talking about. We want to put the default value in there for 1.8. So when I run it, I don't have to type it. I just click OK. And the height was real because remember the calculate BMI, it needed a real parameter. So therefore, I have a real argument here. It still needs to match in number, order, and data type. Number is 1. Well, order doesn't really matter here, but data type has to be real. And remember, when we're calling a function, it will have to be part of another statement, like an assignment statement. So I have stored it as RBMI here, and then I used RBMI in my output. Then we're going to call our toString. Now, remember, well, I haven't said this. After you have done your constructor create, you're no longer going to use tPlayer there. From now on, you're going to use object player dot and then the method. So it's object player dot calculate BMI. ToString is also a function. So a ToString will typically be called like this inside of your rich edit. Some learners do this, so they just do that. It's not going to display anything because it's not part of an object, so we can't see what the ToString is producing. Our ToString will be part of a rich edit, a label, a panel, a show message. There might be more that I can't think of now, but it's going to be part of an object that produces output to the user. So that's what I've done there. And the line below that, that's where I'm showing my BMI that I calculated, rounded off to 1 decimal place. Okay. So last question, just before our time is up, I think this is the last question. We were asked to extract the score selected from the radio group, and then we have to call the correct method to update the score. Remember, we wrote that the procedure update score, and then call the correct method to return the score. That's our accessor method that we have to call. And then we had to display the updated score. That means the score that is returning into my panel component. I'm just going to show you here. There's the radio group 2, 3, and 5. So you can't really use the item index. You're going to have to get the score, but there are multiple ways of getting that score depending on what they selected. So what I've done is I've just used the radio group.items and then the item index of what they selected. And then I used string to int and stored that score 2, 3, or 5 in there. You could have used your item index to say if the item index is a 0, then the score is 2. If the item index is 1, then the score is 3, and item index item index 2, then the score is 5. But you can hear that that's quite a lot of code instead of using this code. Just remember that when you're using this, that you have to repeat the name of the object. So .items and then .item index in the square brackets. Our update score was a procedure, and procedures are not part of other statements. They stand on their own. So I have object player dot update score, and in round brackets, I have the argument that it needs, matching a nod, number 1, order, there's only 1, data type, it's an integer. And then in the caption of my panel, I then display my get score. And remember, get score is a function. So it has to form part of another statement. GetScore is also returning an integer data type, and therefore I would have to enter string GetScore. And that was basically it. But I'm going to show you the running of the program now. But while I hope you guys can see the running, I'm not sure if you can see the running of the program because I want to show you some errors. Hopefully it will show. But in the meanwhile, I want you guys to tell me, tomorrow we're going to do question 4. I want you to type in the Q&A. I want you to type there what you want me to do. My plan is to do the final of 2018 because it has different type of questions, and that we work next week. We work through the final of 2018 in the same way we've done the final of 2019 for you guys to practice. But if you feel there's something else that you want me to have a look at again, we can include that in another lesson. What I want to show you, which I hope you guys can see, is let's say you tested this. I'm not going to click on it now. And now you know this is working. So the second time you run your program, you just click on calculate BMI. There's my input box and it crashes and it says access violation. The reason it's doing that is not because your code is wrong. It's because you are not using your program in the correct order. You have to click on Instantiate the Object. Then only can you click on your Calculate BMI. The same for Update Score. I can now click on Update Score. I can continue there to click on Update Score and I can click on this. But the moment that I stop the running of my program and I run it again, I have to remember to click on 3.2.1 again. So make sure that you guys do that so that you are not trying, because then you guys often get stuck and you think your problem lies in this button and you sit and waste time on that button, and it's just the way that you've used it. And if the edit boxes has no values in them, go and type them in your object inspector to speed up this running, because everywhere all you want to do is you just want to click. Okay, so that, yes.
Got 2 minutes left.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes left, guys. I hope you guys posted some Q&As, else we're doing the final of 2018 next. I'm glad we finished with question 3. For tomorrow, there's question 4 is now left. So go and try it. Do your best to try to do as much as you can. It is quite a difficult question, but the only way you're going to accomplish that is by trying. And go to these sites to download some past papers, and this one to get some links, some tips. And tomorrow we will do question 4 and then possibly final of 2018, unless you guys guide me otherwise. I'm going to listen to what you say. You are the viewers, so you can tell me what we need to do. So thank you very much for joining us at STEM Lockdown Digital School for grade 12 IT. Please remember these videos will be loaded onto the YouTube if you just search there for Africa Teen Gigs, and also follow Africa Teen Gigs on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. New links, but same time. See you tomorrow. Bye.